Okay, so let's refactor this a little bit so that we can reuse this, right? But from anywhere, right? Not just inside of this file, right? So let's refactor that. So one of the good practices is that we split up a lot of this into different dedicated JavaScript files. So for instance, one of the things that we might want to do is have a separate directory called models, for instance, right? Where we include all the needed files that model the database, right? To the model whatever's being stored in the database, right? So for instance, we might have in here the schema in its separate file, right? It's a very common thing to have a separate schema file. So we'll call this employee schema, right? Maybe the client and the server have their own schemas so to differentiate for this and make it explicit that this is a schema that is running on JavaScript, but on the server, we'll call this on server. Okay, and in here we might want to put the schema. Let's put the schema in there. Let's take it out from there, and let's put it in the schema. So there's a schema. There's a schema in its own little file, and let's export it so that other folks can reuse the schema. So to do that, Node.js provides a way to package what's in here in a module, right, and export it to others who would like to be able to import it, right? So to do that is through module.exports and whatever it is that we want to export. So in this case is the employee schema. So others can import now this file, right, and reuse that. Okay? Reuse this schema. And in here we'll also create a dedicated file for the model. We'll do an employee.model.server.js. Okay, and in here we'll move the rest of the file. Let's see, we'll move all this content. All right, let's move it out of here into its dedicated file. There we go. All right, so we have the model. We don't have the schema, so we need to load the schema. Let's do that. Let's var schema, the employee schema. It's no longer in the same file, right? We need to instead load it, right? It's in the same directory, and it's an employee schema. There it is. So now we have the schema. We don't have Mongoose, so we need to load that too. Okay, and now we want to make this file reusable, right? We want anybody to be able to just load this file, require it, and use any of these functions, right? We need to make all these functions available, right, to the outside world, right? The thing is that module.exports only allows you to export one single object. Right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to group all these functions into one single object, and then we'll export that object. Right? So let's do that. Right? So let's do that. So what we can do is use this variable that is already there, right? And we can use it as our container of all these functions. Right? We can say employee dot update employee equal update employee. So now our employee model also contains this function, right? Plus it'll contain all the other functions. Let's add them. A whole bunch of these. We want to update. We want to delete. We want create. We want find employee by username. We want find employee by ID. And finally, employee model dot find all employees. Okay, and then we can export this. We can say modules dot export module. The exports equal employee model. Yes. Now this is all reusable by others, right? If we go back to our app, notice our app is almost empty, right? it's the only thing that's doing is connecting to a database. That's the only thing that it's doing. Everything else is gone. So let's try and reuse it from here. Let's see. Do we have a find? We can load the model. We can say var employee model, which it's no longer here, right? Employee model. We can require it. I think we put it up here. Let's see. Models. I think it's under models and then employee model. There it is. We loaded it, and let's try it. Let's try it from here. Employee model dot find all employees. There it is. Right? There's that function, and we have a then, and we're gonna here have hopefully all the employees. Right? And then we can just console log employees. Okay? All right, so let's try it out. Let's run it. Let's see if it blows up. Okay, it didn't work. Let's see. It can't find employee model server. Did I misspell it? Oh, it's dot models. Let's see. Let's try that again. No, it doesn't have mongoose. Where doesn't it have mongoose? Oh, maybe in the schema it doesn't have mongoose. Yeah, I'm using mongoose, but I never loaded the mongoose library. Okay, let's see. Var mongoose require mongoose. Let's try it again. Okay, there it is. Right? We are now where we were before, but now we have a reusable component, right, that we can then use and talk to a database, right? So our model here, this model server is the equivalent. Right, it's our equivalent of the DAO, right? The data access object that we wrote in Java, right? That was connecting through MySQL and providing all the create statements and the finders and the updates and the deletes, right? Right. This is the equivalent, right? And it's the same principle, right? The principles are the same across any framework you use, right? Whether you're using PHP or Python or Node.js or Java, same principle. There's a data layer, or there's a data layer that abstracts the access to a database, right? You wouldn't just use the low level, right, dot update and the sets and whatnot, right? These are low level access to a database. Instead, we provided a higher level of abstraction where you can provide IDs, you can provide employee objects, right? High level objects, right? JSON objects, and not have to deal with the idiosyncrasies of the low level. We could replace all this by an underlying implementation of Postgres, right, or MySQL, right? But leave this API, this high-level API, untouched, right? So anybody who's using this API, right, would be unaffected by the change in the vendor. Whether you're using a relational database or you're using a NoSQL database, would be unaffected, right? So same thing. The same principle we followed in Java. All right, let's now see if we could use this from outside, right? Export the data that we have now and see if we can access it from the outside, maybe from a browser, maybe from like an Angular 4 client, right? That can access the data from other than just a server, right? And let's do that next.